For millions of years, they have disemboweled the earth, sent continents ablaze, covered entire regions under a deadly carpet of ashes, and we stand in their way.
Volcanoes are actually one of the most dynamic and dramatic manifestations of the power of nature.
In recent centuries, volcanoes have killed nearly 300,000 people across the globe. Yet 500 million men and women daily defy these fire monsters.
All of the houses that was once here got covered by the lava flow.
So if they become destructive, if we're in the way of them, they just do their thing, and humanity is turned up, and sometimes we're in the wrong place at the wrong time.
In this classic David versus Goliath, they find new levels of solidarity and ingenuity to thwart the volcano's assaults.
It's critical for communities who live around volcanoes to be able to adapt to the volcanic activity.
Faced with the elements unleashed, man fights an eternal battle of fierce resistance. Located off Iceland, the Vestmann archipelago is made up of 14 islands that have been thrust out of the sea by underwater eruptions. Their peaceful appearance belies an intense volcanic activity.
Yes, it's incredible after all these years, 42, 43 years. I want to protect my family, not my house, but my family. And I thought, we are dying. Death is coming now.
In 1973, Gerdur and the inhabitants of Pompeii suffer the terrible bite of the lava.
I remember the television pictures showing this amazing lava fountains and this town that was just being engulfed by lava.
Gerdur's house is just in front of the fault from which lava flows. She has a ringside seat of the eruption.
At 1:20 a.m., there was a big earthquake, really huge, and my whole corridor was lit up. I went to see what the light was, and I opened the curtains and saw an enormous column of fire just in front of my window. My husband said, "Dress the children, we must flee." We found ourselves paralyzed in front of the window because we were watching the earth open. It exploded and went in two directions.
Whether it takes the form of flows, fountains, or destructive explosions, the insatiable appetite of incandescent lava is a threat to man.
The noise and the smell, and also the visual aspects, it's really an assault on the senses. Especially the noise, it's actually deafening, but the smell as well of the lava and the heat. Even though you can be 500 meters away from a fire fountain, the heat can be absolutely extraordinary.
Lava flows can be destructive because they can cover large areas, which means that they can make land unusable. They're also destructive to infrastructure, so they can destroy houses and other types of infrastructure.
The 5,000 inhabitants are evacuated, not knowing whether they'll see their little town again. The eruption continues for 6 months. While the lava fountains devour the houses, the flows advance dangerously towards the port, the economic heart of the village. If the lava obstructs access to the port, Pompeii is finished. But a handful of men decide to stay on the island, determined to fight. Armed with simple water cannons, they tried to stop the lava flows. Sigi was one of them.
Where we sprayed the most, we could see it stopping. But the lava was trying to get by at both ends. So we tried to fix things. But there were soon no more pumps because we melted 1 or 2 motors each day. So the American army brought in pumps from Texas. That enabled us to spray a bigger area of lava and hold it back. And then to get on top of it and cool it down in order to consolidate the part that held everything in.
The town is saved in extremis. Today, a huge natural barrier formed by cooled lava protects the harbor from wind and storms. The Pompeii community has emerged stronger and closer than ever from this terrible ordeal.
I was a young single man, 24 years old. For better or for worse, I wouldn't have missed that experience for anything.
But the battle against lava is one that other peoples have almost lost. In the early 1990s, Hawaii was ravaged by Kilauea's lava flows, of an intensity similar to that of 2018. Kalapana, a neighborhood of 100 inhabitants, was literally wiped from the map. Pilani's family have lived on these shifting lands for generations.
In 1986 is when the first lava came to this area. And so the lava came all the way till the road right there, and that's the highway. That used to be the old Kalapana Road. And so we were told that we needed to evacuate. Lava comes, the lava doesn't touch the house and the house burn. The lava is far from the house. Just the heat of the lava, it combusts. Then the lava comes and it goes under the house. Prior to the lava flow, this whole area was full of mango trees, coconut trees. It was just so lush and green. It was very much a paradise, yeah.
Kilauea has been in permanent eruption since 1983. The huge quantity of lava, which has been spewed out more than 200 Olympic-sized swimming pools per day, remodels the island territory as it advances irreversibly towards the sea. By plunging into the ocean, the lava creates new lands, but it leaves a trail of destruction in its wake.
What will happen is that the population within immediate reach of the volcano will be evacuated, and they will have to go and live somewhere completely different for a while. And then once the eruption is over, they will come back and reoccupy their houses. But in the cases of some of these phenomena, pyroclastic flows and lavas, they will come back to discover the land completely changed and their houses perhaps destroyed.
In the aftermath of the disaster, the inhabitants do not let themselves be downhearted and rebuild in the same spot where their old houses lie, 10 meters under the cooled lava.
Long ago, there were over 250 families that lived in here, and many of the homes got covered by in fact, all of the houses that was once here got covered by the lava flow. Every single house is a new house. Many of the families just removed their valuables and they watched their home go up in flames.
The Hawaiians have learned to accept this cycle of creative destruction.
It's all about that respect. Respect for nature, respect for the magma, the lava. And so the Hawaiians have a name for everything. We have a name for every different part of the lava flow.
The Hawaiian Islands are all volcanoes, and the native Hawaiian population have grown up in those landscapes, and particularly on the big island of Hawaii. So a lot of their culture, I think, is really imbued by the lava that is omnipresent in their landscape.
Yet the destruction caused by Kilauea offers a real opportunity, that of a way of life apart. These lunar landscapes attract a population weary of the tumult of modern society, in search of a new connection with the forces of nature. A community of hardcore enthusiasts has assembled on the lava fields, ready to risk everything to live closer to the volcanic forces.
The place where they live is their home, and often these are, as well as being great providers for their livelihoods, these are places of intense beauty, and it's where their relatives are, it's where they grew up. And in much the same ways we'd feel an attachment to where we grew up, why wouldn't people who live around volcanoes feel that, even when it's in a moment of eruption?
We know that it can happen when you're asleep at night, that Stromboli can suddenly explode, that it can destroy your house and bury you inside.
Stromboli is an island volcano with prodigious activity. Its eruptive mouth has been spitting volcanic bombs and lava flows continuously for more than 2,500 years. Perched on its flanks, the village of Ginostra has lived for generations to the tune of the mountain's moods. Most of the inhabitants have quit the island for more clement horizons, fleeing Stromboli's regular eruptions. But a handful of hardliners refuse to leave their native land.
I think the reason people stay there is because that's their home. That's where they've been born. You know, why would you leave? I mean, what we find is that even in some places where the volcanologists can make forecasts that there will be a crisis, and there's even a mandatory evacuation by the government, sometimes villagers don't evacuate.
Pasquale decided to stay on the island that saw him born, despite the dangers.
We who are from here, we are very attentive to the sounds we hear, the slightly strange feelings. We're already ready to leave. Someone who's not from here may not even notice what's going on. It's a matter of minutes, of seconds. In a few seconds, you must try to escape, to find safety. I remember when I was a child and the older people would tell me about Stromboli erupting. I kept in mind the terrible stories they tell of this experience. And I remember that at night, I dreamed of fire, rivers of magma flooding through the streets. I knew very well my mother wouldn't like me saying I wanted to stay. I remember she cried when I told her. Fate has relegated us to this place, and we continue to live here. The dangers go hand in hand with the good points, its beauty, its nature. It's like a god you must respect, yet at the same time fear. We know that at any time it could destroy everything, and we could even lose our lives.
In the immense crash of eruptions, the Earth is torn apart, pulverized, battered by the wind, giving birth to another destructive phenomenon, a fine volcanic dust. This ash covers entire regions, enveloping populations in a thick volcanic cloud.
Volcanic ash is generally the smaller particles that are created during a volcanic explosion.
Magma contains dissolved gases, which are kept inside that magma at a high pressure inside the volcano. When the volcano erupts, then those gases get released, and the gases drive the explosive activity. They push the magma.
And the smaller particles, the blown apart pieces of magma, are volcanic ash. And those are given the energy from the explosion to put them up into the atmosphere, and then eventually they rain down according to the size of the eruption at places further away from the volcano.
In Japan, the Sakurajima volcano is in permanent eruption. Ashes and debris rain down on the population daily. The 600,000 inhabitants of Kagoshima still carry the traumatic scars of the eruption that nearly swept away their city. On January 12, 1914, with Sakurajima dormant for almost a century, a powerful eruption, bigger than any recorded in Japan in the 20th century, devastated the region. 60 people lost their lives, and the city was buried beneath the ashes. While waiting for the next major eruption, life is organized under the ashes of Sakurajima.
For many volcanic hazards, the only way to prepare for them is to be prepared to get out of their pathway, so not to be close to them when there's a chance that they might occur.
So evacuation drills are tremendously important, especially when you have a volcano that is likely to erupt, is frequently active.
Each year, on the anniversary of the Great Eruption, an evacuation drill is held in real conditions to prepare the population for the worst. The 6,000 inhabitants of the isthmus formed by the volcano are assembled and evacuated. Mr. Shimara is one of them.
I find taking part in evacuation drills reassuring. We know people suffered a lot during the Great Eruption, so we train every year to avoid repeating the catastrophe.
These exercises are carried out with rigor and discipline.
It's extremely important so that everybody can understand the role that they would play in that situation and the procedure for how to move and how to get people out.
The ash falls deeply mark the community's daily routine. From childhood, the inhabitants of Sakurajima learn to integrate volcanic vagaries in their habits. On the way to school, the safety instructions are strict and protective helmets are the order of the day.
Volcanic ash is a very important phenomena that comes out of volcanoes because it acts in all sorts of different ways. Often it's associated as well, it has a coating of acid and it can burn vegetation and cause problems for the crops.
Iceland is a 100% volcanic island. Its inhabitants have also learned to live with the permanent risk of a sudden eruption. Here, the intense heat of volcanoes rubs shoulders with the biting cold of glaciers. When these two opposite elements meet, the magma is pulverized in a terrible clash, giving birth to huge ash plumes.
Phreatomagmatic eruptions are so explosive because as that steam is created, it acts to help blow the magma apart, so it creates an additional component of explosion. And obviously there's all that energy for the steam from converting from the water form to the gaseous form, which creates a desire to expand outwards, taking the magma and blowing it apart with it.
At the foot of the Eyjafjallajökull volcano is a small farm that has been handed down from father to son for generations.
The most difficult moments of my life were having to give up all those animals and leave my farm and our home. Our farm was no longer the safest place for us.
On March 20, 2010, Eyjafjallajökull began to erupt and the magma encountered the glacier topping this active volcano.
We were told that an eruption had begun in the volcano around 1 a.m. And by 6 o'clock, we had confirmation that it was under the glacier. We fed the animals and made sure that they had enough water and hay because we expected a cloud of ash the next day. And it came. It was dark here for 3 days.
It will coat the landscape in ash, so it will compromise agriculture, it will kill livestock, it will get in the lungs of livestock. There'll be many, many different problems.
The eruption lasted 6 weeks. We couldn't do anything but wait and hope it would stop. 5 centimeters of ash fell around the farm, and all the fields were black. We didn't know if the grass would ever grow back.
There are some more technological ways that volcanoes can interrupt our lives. In 2010, the eruption of Eyjafjallajökull in Iceland, which was a relatively modest-sized event, caused a global crisis for aviation.
Volcanic ash can be ingested into aircraft jet engines, and it can damage those engines. And in some cases, it can cause those engines to stop during flight. So there's a very significant risk associated with commercial aviation encountering volcanic ash.
The Reykjavik Air Traffic Control Center then experienced the biggest crisis in its history. The ash cloud extended to the south, covering all of Western Europe, nailing planes to the ground. And when they finally could take off, the long-haul flights outbound to the US had to bypass the cloud by passing through northern Iceland. The small airport in Reykjavik handled more than 1,000 planes a day, double its maximum capacity. 70% of air traffic in Europe was grounded, some 16,000 flights. The European Commission evaluated the direct economic repercussions of the eruption at €2 billion.
I think pyroclastic flows are the deadliest phenomenon.
Ash is a cunning enemy. It gets into everything. But when the fine dust is mixed with burning volcanic gases, it turns into a terrible force for destruction.
A pyroclastic flow is a hot volcanic avalanche that's formed from volcanic gas and volcanic ash collapsing and flowing down the sides of the volcano.
If you're caught in a pyroclastic flow, there is very little chance of survival.
When I look at that school building destroyed and compare it to the one before the eruption, it makes me so sad that I cry. Tears come to my eyes and I cry.
In Japan, in the 1990s, Mount Unzen released dozens of pyroclastic flow. The landscape was disfigured for months by these incandescent avalanches. Mr. Oshimo, a teacher, returns to the vestiges of his school, swept away by the volcano's burning breath.
At first, the locals and I did not know what a pyroclastic flow was. It was the first time that we'd heard that word. At the time of the eruption, it was totally different from what I had experienced that far. I had never seen the dome of lava collapse into such a fiery cloud. It split, and we had to evacuate each time in different directions. But I had never watched them closely. The main thing at that moment was staying alive. I narrowly escaped death, so I remember the fear I felt then. When this school burned on September the 15th, all the teachers and students were evacuated, the local residents too, so we didn't have any dead or injured in the fire.
The only protection from a pyroclastic flow is not to be in the area that that pyroclastic flow is going to go into.
Though modern-day watchers have learned to decipher the warning signs of the eruptions and resist the volcano's onslaughts, 2,000 years ago, they knew nothing of their dangers.
An example of an eruption that generated significant pyroclastic flows is the AD 79 eruption of Vesuvius, where you had, we think, column collapse from the Plinian column, with the pyroclastic flows then running down the sides of the volcano and destroying settlements like Herculaneum and Pompeii.
Imagine the arrival of this matter, a cloud of volcanic ash dozens of meters high, totally black, and at an extremely high temperature, a high temperature that carbonizes wood and kills the inhabitants. It must be much worse than hell.
The pyroclastic flow that fell on Pompeii and Herculaneum claimed more than 3,000 lives. Buried beneath the ash, the two cities were only rediscovered in the 18th century. Mauro De Vito is a volcanologist. By studying the deposits of ashes, he has reconstructed the day these two Roman cities were wiped off the map.
The effect of the pyroclastic flow at very high temperatures was so intense that we find all these disarticulated bodies in disorder. These bodies were studied, and we found that death was caused by asphyxia, but also by the very high temperature which dehydrated bodies instantly.
Perfectly preserved by volcanic ash, the remains of Herculaneum and Pompeii are today invaluable witnesses for historians.
This mass obviously engulfed the corridors, filled the rooms, and in many cases flattened walls. It moved boats and many other objects, even the very biggest, sometimes tossing them into other walls, like missiles.
In 1944, Vesuvius began erupting again. For Neapolitans, it was a real shock.
The latest eruption of Vesuvius in 1944 happened at the end of the Second World War, when the city of Naples had plenty of other problems to handle. There was the Allied bombing, and in the memory of our elders, the volcano was just a volcano that produced intense phenomena. But they didn't see it as dangerous. Obviously, the populations directly affected by a phenomenon perpetuate the memory, but with time, this memory fades very easily.
Today, Vesuvius still towers over the city of Naples and threatens the 600,000 inhabitants with its terrible pyroclastic flow. Volcanoes harbor another deadly scourge that's much more surprising.
Volcanoes and water don't mix, or when they do mix, it's an explosive combination.
When living mountains awake, glaciers melt and riverbeds overflow. In Indonesia, torrential rains are a threat to populations near volcanoes. The authorities regularly evacuate thousands of inhabitants.
It's always the same thing that scares me. When it's cloudy, when it rains, and mainly the risks of flooding.
The island of Java has a tropical climate marked by heavy precipitation, which falls on the Semeru volcano, which is covered with ashes. Huge quantities of volcanic debris are swept along, forming destructive mudslides.
Explosive eruptions can disperse volcanic ash over long distances from volcanoes. That ash can be remobilized by rainfall to form what we call a lahar, which is essentially a volcanic debris flow, or a flow of water that contains volcanic ash and other volcanic debris. Lahars can be incredibly destructive. They can travel quite long distances from the volcano.
Indra knows how important evacuation drills can be. She lost several members of her family in these volcanic torrents.
Someone from my family was evacuated with her parents. She had already left, but just after, she returned to fetch the goats. The flood arrived, and she couldn't cope. She couldn't lift her legs. So she reached out to grab someone, missed him, then caught him, then found herself in a tree where there were so many people it collapsed. After that, she was caught in a whirlwind. She was 9 months pregnant, and she died. She was family.
We were about 13 kilometers from the summit of Semeru. We never have hot clouds. But if the cold lava goes down here, our men and our women will be the most affected. We have a total population of 120,000 people who must be evacuated as quickly as possible. So, the scenario here is that we have to save the people who work at the river and those who work in the fields. As soon as the siren sounds, they must run to the security point on the other side of the river or to the right of the river. This river represents a means of livelihood for the population here. That's why they should be trained in what to do when it floods. They must save only their lives and leave behind them any equipment like cars, etc. Just their lives. They must know that, but they already know the natural signs. When there's a big mass that whitens at the top, it means they must avoid it, move away from it.
Basically, we're always afraid. It's the Almighty who decides.
Volcanoes contain some of the most extraordinary landscapes on our planet. But these wonders of nature sometimes hide insidious dangers, invisible to the naked eye. The Kawah Ijen crater in Indonesia is home to the most acidic lake in the world, a huge pool of turquoise water saturated with sulfur.
Kawah Ijen is an extraordinary volcano. It's got probably the largest vat of hot acid in the world, kind of bath temperature, and so acidic that if you put anything metal in it, it will corrode pretty quickly. It's not a good place to go swimming.
Kawah Ijen's huge crater is not big enough to contain this toxic water. The lake overflows and seeps into the waterways that irrigate the whole valley. Sumati is a volcanologist. She watches Kawah Ijen's acid lake like milk on the stove.
Here, the pH is 0, so the acidity is extremely high, the same as Kawah Ijen's lake water. River water with a pH of 0 or close to it is very dangerous for the environment, the plants, and the soil.
This water is poison for the region's inhabitants. Whether consumed directly or used to irrigate the rice paddies scattered throughout this territory, Kawah Ijen's acid water poses a significant health risk. Saijun, chief of Bantal village, has been fighting this scourge for years.
People who consume water from the river, they do not only suffer from diarrhea or itching, they also suffer from dental problems. Their teeth are very fragile. Many of them are toothless. And if they are not toothless, their teeth are red. They can't be cleaned, no matter what product you use, because it's already embedded inside. The problem with the water affects 10,000 people.
To fight against the acid waters of Kawah Ijen, Indonesians got together and dug a dense network of wells and pipes to draw water directly from the groundwater.
Here the water is 90 meters deep, because at 90 meters there is clean water that the population can consume. They are very happy with this situation. That is because it is no longer necessary to consume water from the river.
In Hawaii, Mauna Loa is the largest volcano on our planet. Forced from the waves by successive eruptions, it grows layer by layer over millennia. But this volcanic colossus is unstable. its gigantic structure hides a surprising danger which threatens all the archipelago's coastline.
If you look at volcanoes, you often find that, especially ones in islands or coasts, you find big slices out of them where the volcano has collapsed. And in many coastal and island volcanoes, those collapses go into the sea. And if they've happened fast enough, they will displace the sea and produce a huge tsunami. And by huge, it's tens of meters. So the tsunamis can be much larger than those generated by earthquakes. Islands like Hawaii that have got these collapses. And there's evidence from the geology that they've had these huge waves in the distant past.
Jared Fryer is a geologist. He is studying the impact of a tsunami that struck the island several thousand years ago, the better to predict the next tidal wave.
You see a cliff. It doesn't look very large. It's only from 100 to 200 meters high, okay. But we think it is the sidewall of a giant landslide. Total volume of the landslide was several hundred cubic kilometers, or maybe 1,000 cubic kilometers. Drew down water level probably about 2 kilometers. So this is a gigantic wave, probably about 150 to 200 meters high. So it washes ashore a tremendous distance. Or the one here, 250,000 years ago, yes, it would have taken about maybe 10, 15 minutes. They're just, wow. These landslides, they seem to occur every 50,000 years or so. And there's maybe a dozen of them that we can identify offshore. So it is a recurrent phenomenon. Fortunately, in a human lifetime, it's a very rare event. Mm-hmm. But as far as the volcano is concerned, it is a very important part of how the volcano evolves and grows.
Tsunamis are a permanent danger in Hawaii. Whether caused by the collapse of a volcano or earthquakes, they threaten all the coastal cities of the archipelago. These quakes are closely related to the volcanism of the Pacific Ring of Fire. From the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, Jared monitors the coast of Hawaii for the slightest tremor. In the event of an alert, all of the archipelago's settlements are immediately evacuated to the highest points of the Hawaiian Islands.
The big hazard historically in Hawaii is tsunamis that come across the ocean from great earthquakes around the Pacific, the Ring of Fire. And those have caused extreme flooding and caused a lot of deaths. The primary concern is big earthquakes, which generate tsunamis. So everything is keyed to earthquakes.
I hope it'll be coming through, but if it doesn't...
For Hawaii, we have to be faster, because if there is a local earthquake, the tsunami travels very fast through the islands.
So not only...
Every family has been through one of these things. And by far the worst was 1946.
Mountainous waves at 450 miles an hour hit the Hawaiian Islands, creating the most costly disaster in the history of our newest state.
The tsunami devastated the Hawaiian coast, killing close to 160 people. Benedict, one of the survivors, carries with her the traumatic memory of the disaster.
The house started to lift up and move. And my father was afraid that we would be crushed. So he threw me out into the water. So we hung onto a hedge out there and let the water go back down, out a little bit, and as it went out, then we were able to walk down on the rocks and get away. Okay. People went out and they saw the water going out and they saw fish flopping, yeah. And they grabbed fish. And then when the next wave came in, they were covered with water. We pay attention now.
Fiery furnaces, lunar landscapes, deserts of ash. Volcanoes are symbols of destruction and desolation.
So the truth is that if you look into human history, there's lots of examples of cities being destroyed by volcanic eruptions, or even civilizations that seem to come to an end when there's a dramatic volcanic crisis. But actually, you know what? Across the course of human history, volcanoes have given humanity far more than they've taken away.
Yet in their bowels, they hide astonishing riches. On landscapes burnt to a cinder by lava and suffocated by ash, a new life cycle is beginning.
And so very quickly, after a volcanic eruption, the system can re-establish and the volcanic ecosystem can be vibrant.
On the slopes of volcanoes, hell can suddenly turn into paradise.
There is this tremendous synergy, symbiotic relationship between life and the volcano that's quite dramatic.